Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to have a video on a form library I'm building called OneForm. This video is going to detail the start of my quest to build the best form library. I know that sounds like a pretty broad claim, but that is my goal. I wanted to build this entire thing on camera so people can know why I made the decisions I did and how it's built. Because why would you want to use something that you don't really understand the internals? Sometimes you do. It makes sense. But a lot of times you want to know how it's built, because if you don't understand how it's built, you can't use it correctly. That's another reason I want to do this. I think that by building it on camera, I can also help other people learn how to build these kinds of libraries with the same ideas in mind. I often build tools at work and I think about it and I say, how did that person do that thing? Or how does this library accomplish this? It's all meant to be black boxed and masked from you, but I like to make that available. But sometimes you just want the black box experience. You just want to put it in and work with it. And a lot of times that's fine. But if you really don't know the internals, the problem is you can wind up with very crazy things happening and you don't know why. You sit there spending all night or all day trying to figure out the solution to your problem. To fix that, I'm going to do it all on camera. Number one, let's go to a mind map and we're going to come up with some goals. Before that, I want to talk about this project. I already built it before because this isn't the first time. Now, I didn't code it myself. I came up with the architecture and somebody else coded it because I was working on something else. This happened at work and it was inspired by my work at Minted. While I came up with 90% of the architecture, someone else did the coding and the rest of the team chipped in ideas. I want to give a shout out to everybody there. I'll definitely, when I put up the README and everything, I'll give a shout out to all the people that participated. This wasn't just built out of the blue. It's not like I just came up with the best form library. I saw other things going on. I saw a need for a solution. I saw what Minted needed in particular because we had lots of different forms, crazy amounts of forms, and they're all different and they have different requirements and they do data over time and other things. And how do we fix these ideas? And this is the architecture I came up with. And I wanted to build that in an open source way that everybody could use it. That's also why I'm building it from scratch, which is going to be tough because it's been a while. It's been over 6 months now, and I got to remember the ideas I came up with and why I came up with those ideas. One of the things that's important with a form library is performance. Performance is key because I don't want this to be a bottleneck in your application. If this is the bottleneck in your application, that's a big problem. It also should be built with performance because other people can copy what I do. If you can do that, then your application will also be performant. I don't want to mask or hide any of the things I'm doing. The other thing is that forms update as people type. Listen to updates. So I don't even know what this category would be, but forms listen to updates as you type. And so you don't want characters randomly appearing and disappearing. I guess it needs to be deterministic, which is why the original version I built is synchronous. There is no asynchronicity with the form because you can get into weird race conditions. Now, there are ways to have asynchronicity, but it would wipe your form state on purpose. Now, I might change that. It also needs to be deterministic because you need to be able to predict what will happen. You also, I guess what's more important is that you shouldn't notice letters appearing and disappearing. You're probably wondering, why am I mapping all this out? Why am I doing this here instead of off camera? Because I want to show people what I think about and how I'm putting the ideas down. And when I go to build it, you'll know exactly what I should build. If I don't make this document, you're not going to know what I'm building or why. There are going to be other videos where I go through and I start taking these ideas and I will be putting them into the actual code. I have ideas of how the form should work and what it should do, but I'm trying to review the basics of it so that everybody else knows what the form is and what it should do. And I'm doing it live on camera, which is really difficult. I want it to be something that people can use to better their own code. We also want a clean API, but this is subjective. I would say highly subjective, but it's not because there are some things that you could say would represent a clean API. It needs a clean API. That one's going to be tough, but we'll get there. I think the form needs to be treated like a state manager. I think this is important. It needs to be treated like a state manager. The reason it needs to be treated like a state manager is because a form library is a state manager. This particular form library that we're going to build, I've built in Excel like a spreadsheet thing with it. I did it where you can type in the thing and you can do calculations on it and then you can make the field appear, disappear based on the value of it. I don't want to go too detailed, but I was able to build that in a couple hours. So it didn't take that long. And not only had 2 operations, sum and average, but it could even you could put the colon and you can get more than just 2 fields. You can get a whole range of fields. So it had all of that after just a couple hours of work. So that shows you how crazy good this can be if you do it right. Another one, it has to be better. Hang on, best. I'm just going to put best here. It has to be better than others. And what most people would consider the best right now is Formic. So it has to be better than Formic. Now, I've seen it used at places I worked or online. I don't use Formic. And I actually built this library because I didn't want to use. I keep saying I built this library, but I'm wanting to build this library. It's so weird because it's already built. I came up with the architecture, but it's already built and it's at work, but I don't have it built yet. So I want to build this because I want it to be better than Formic. It's a little confusing for me because there's when I'm talking about what I want to build, it's technically already built. but I'm not using any of that code. I have to come up with all of it from scratch. And that's, again, why we're doing this, because I need to think up what the heck I need to build. It'll have the same API as what I built already, but some other things will change, especially about the internals, I'm sure. Because we'll think about different, this one is where I'm going to start maybe making some changes, because it needs to be more generic, and there are other use cases that I didn't consider before. We need validation. That needs to be built in. And it's not just validation. Group validation needs to be in there. And you also need to have error handling. And when I say error handling, I don't mean like handling errors. I mean handling validation errors. I should say validation error handling, because fields don't necessarily have errors. Like, let's say you're typing in a form and the form is supposed to look up to see if a domain is available. One of the things error handling would be when an error comes back, you're supposed to display an error message on the field. I would say that's a field validation error, not necessarily a error. Like you have to handle a try catch or something like that. This is not a bug in your code. This is a validation error. It's going to have validation error handling built in. And that was the extent of my notes, but that's not the extent of what I wanted to build. It also needs to take values. These need to be able to be taken in from props. The reason they need to be able to be taken in from props is because you might have a request from an API and you got to get your data and put it into the form. So the form needs to be able to take data in from an API. Now, does it need to merge values? That's not a requirement I have right now, that you can merge values. If you modify values outside the form, the way it's built today, there is no way for you to, outside of the form, actually, it's not true either. There are ways to do it, because I built the Excel spreadsheet and I did some things with that. Okay, so there are ways to merge values. There are ways to merge values, and there most likely want to be ways to merge values, but it's not going to be as straightforward. You're not just going to pass a new values prop and it's going to merge them in. And no, it would wipe your form state. There are ways to merge values, but it's not the way you expect. Merge values is important on change. So when a field changes, you can merge values. That's a good way to do it. You could also merge values. You know how DOM elements have a ref? If I exported a ref off of OneForm, then you could also merge values. Or I could have a hook that, yes, it could be, even if it's outside the form and it's outside the context, you can still access the form context. And from that context, you would be able to merge values in the form. I can add that functionality. That's something that I think could be valuable. Because what if you have Firebase and it's updating on the fly? As people are changing values, you want to be able to see those reported in the form. You don't have to clear out the whole form and lose your updates. So you might want to merge values outside of the form. Now, the way I would accomplish that, because if you've had any work with React before, you can't get access to context outside of where it's been defined, but you can. You just have to use events to do it. You could use native JavaScript events on window. How would that work server-side? I'm not sure, but I don't think it matters server-side. So again, these are some things that's why I'm saying I want to add some features that I don't know about yet. That's where the deterministic comes in. Because if you can update the form state without clearing that, you can merge into the state, then you're doing some things which I didn't intend in the original build, because it wasn't a thing we cared about. We never had that problem, so I didn't take it into account. I took into account every possible form that we did have, but this is a use case which I didn't. What else is clean API? With validation, there are two different ways to pass in validations. And you would say that's not a clean API. It actually makes it so you have a clean API, because you have a simple way of a normal field validation. Let's put here what's called field level validation. And then there's like group validations, which are, oh, that's cool. When you have multiple fields that you have to subscribe to changes in, and then you have to validate among all of those, but you only want to do it if those fields exist. Obviously, if the fields aren't there, you don't want to validate them. That's another big piece, it's what's called registration. In the case of the fields, it would be like field registration. Let me see if I can pull this back. I don't know if you can read it though, if I pull it back. I'll just work from here. Registration needs to be at the field level. We do not register errors. Error fields are not registered. That it doesn't really matter, but I'm just putting this to you people that don't know understand. Registrations at the field level by default would be when the field mounts. It could be a select or anything else, but I'm just saying it's input. So when the field component mounts, that is by default when your field is registered. And when it unmounts, it would unregister. I'm mounting a field, unregister the field. Does it modify the values? Does it do anything with the values? No, it does not delete values. The form is a state manager, and the state stays for the entirety of the form. As long as the form is still mounted, the state will remain that you've had. There's currently no way to get rid of state in the form. And I don't have any ideas for how to do that, but if you could do this, then the form needs a way for you to modify state from outside. I would probably put it under state, and I would probably put this under state as well. And so one of the things is you want to modify state from outside the form. And that's important because if you can modify the state from outside the form, then you can also delete fields when you don't want them. I don't know if people need any of this stuff, right? This is like way advanced. to think about having to modify the form state from outside the form. You're being given the internals of it, and technically I don't want to make those available. But you can do it. If you need to hack something in, you could totally do it. I just have to make it available. So basically, normal things in like DOM elements that you have a ref on them, this would be similar to a ref. It would be something you put it in there and it assigns an object to the ref, and then you have access now to the form state outside the form. I would like normal libraries don't ever expose this stuff, and I don't really want to expose it either. This is like maybe I should say it's an optional thing. It's an optional thing. I can see why you would want it though. I just don't think you should ever do it. Yeah, so these are by default. So right with what I want to build here, the registration would not be tied to the component mounting. You can make it like by default, that would be the case. But if you want to make your own field component, or if you need something special where you need to put fields in the page that aren't registered, I don't know why you'd want that, but there could be cases. You would need to have the capability of having those be separate. That's fine. Is there anything else in the requirements here? There's some other things I know about, like how you handle certain data types or inputs. We'll go into those when we get to the implementation, but these are the requirements of the form library. There are a couple other requirements. It needs to be a library, and the library needs to have a fancy logo. And you don't think that's important, but it's probably the most important thing. If you want people to download it, it needs to have a fancy logo, fancy name, which is why we chose OneForm. I have gone through, 50 names, and you think, 50 names, and then you just picked one. It was like, no, it was 50 names, and maybe 40 of them were already taken. So OneForm is at this point is whatever I'm left with, but I still think it's a really good name. It's a strong name. I don't like having a number. This could be confusing for people, but I think this is good. Yeah, I think of OneForm in the sense that it's the only form you need. And when I want to build the best form library, I don't want it to be called best form. That just sounds full of itself. So OneForm is okay. It's implying that it's the one form you need, but it's not saying you only have to use it. So it also needs components and hooks. Now, these are for the React side of the library. We can build OneForm in other libraries. This is specifically going to be built with React technology in React. And I'm doing that for the reason of not having any dependencies other than React, and then making sure that when you're using it, it's going to work as you expect. And so as long as we're not doing anything weird, it will have the performance you want, which is a key. It'll be deterministic. All those other features will be very easy to build in, but we're going to have to do it a little bit. It's not the typical way you might design a React component. It still will be using hooks and built the way you expect, but it won't be typical because there are a few things with useref that we need to do to get that kind of performance and to make it work the way you expect it to work. Also, all the values need to be memoized. If they're not memoized, then you're just passing in, if you pass in values and you keep passing a new object, my form is going to assume that is a new values object and you want the form to clear the state and use that new object. If you, for some reason, have a set of values in the form that are being recreated every time, you need some way to merge those in. Hacky, but could fix those situations for people. I want this to be used by everybody. I don't want it to be Formic. And you're saying like, why not Formic? I don't remember. It's been so long. I haven't looked this up in maybe 9 months at this point. So it's been a long time. I really do like this. I think it's worked out well. And the thing is, there are some things like Formic, you have to do the validation, all that stuff yourself. So this comes with it built in. And when you see the API, I think you'll agree that this is a library that you want. This is going to be the way, hopefully, in the future, that people build forms in React at least, and maybe in other web applications as well. That's my video for today. If you like this and you're excited, I'm going to release another video pretty soon, and it's going to have the rest of it. Now, most likely, I've already built this whole thing and then finished everything by the time even you're watching the first video, but this is where I'm at right now. If you're curious, if you want to get more involved, ask me questions, see what I think, because I definitely will take advice. And if I need to pivot or change something, I'd rather do it early than later. Definitely get at me. And if you're watching this, let's say 5 years from now, it's still probably a good idea to give me some ideas, because maybe I need to change API for some reason because I did something stupid. Or in 5 years, people's needs can change, and then I might need to address those. Now, most likely, if this thing takes off, I will already know what those needs are, because people will be already sending me issues and stuff and telling me they thought it was stupid or they didn't like something that is done. Like, there's no way everybody's gonna like this thing. But I want it to be the one form that you use. I want it to be the library that, no matter what, if you have to get one library added to React, this is the thing you think about when you need forms. This is what you think about. This is the first go-to. Everybody's thinking about. There's no debate at this point. There's no React final form. There's no Redux form. No discussions on anything. No Formic. You're just thinking one form. That's my goal. I'm hoping to build something that accomplishes that task. All right. Thank you, everybody, very much. And we'll get to the API and the components in the next video.